In this next section of the presentation, we're going to be discussing luminaires, lighting control, and receptacles. I think we should start this section by defining or verifying the definition for what a luminaire is. And the California Electrical Code defines a luminaire as what we would call the light fixture, which is the actual hardware component of the light fixture itself, including the lamps, and the lamps are what used to be referred to as the bulbs. So the luminaire, as the California Electrical Code discusses and defines it, is a light fixture plus the lamps. Now throughout this particular presentation, I may use the term luminaire and light fixture in the same manner. I don't mean to confuse anyone, but for the purposes of this presentation, luminaires are definitely comparable to just the light fixture itself for our discussion. So let's start by just verifying that all luminaires, lamp holders, and retrofit kits must be listed. This is required per Article 410.6. And the luminaires must be installed so that all conductor connections between the luminaire and the circuit may be inspected without disconnecting the wiring. This is required per Article 410.8. And there are also location restrictions. Specifically, in wet locations, all luminaires located in wet locations must be marked suitable for wet locations, as verified in Article 410.10a. In damp locations, all luminaires located in damp locations must be marked either suitable for wet locations or suitable for damp locations. And this seems fairly obvious. Luminaires that are located within indoor sports facilities with mercury vapor or metal halide lamps must be of a type that protects the lamp from breakage. This is pretty obvious because obviously you don't want the lamps to be broken by any of the sports activities that are taking place within the sports facility and then raining down on sports participants. This requirement is identified in Article 410.10e. Luminaires that are installed in or under metal corrugated sheet roof decking must have 1.5-inch minimum separation from the lowest portion of the roof deck to the top of the luminaire. This is required in an attempt to make sure that any fastening of insulation or roofing components or other ancillary devices or equipment mounted to the roof, that the fasteners would not penetrate the actual luminaires and create some sort of electrical hazard. This requirement is detailed in Article 410.10f. Electrical discharge and LED surface-mounted luminaires mounted over a concealed outlet box must have suitable openings providing access to the wiring in the box. And again, this goes back to the requirement that we discussed in a previous slide where the wiring connections must be visible without disconnecting wiring. This is reiterated in Article 410.24b. Now we're going to discuss some of the details regarding support of luminaires. And this particular topic is covered in Articles 410.30 and .36. Outlet boxes for luminaire support must be designed to support 50 pounds minimum. This is reiterated in Article 314.27a2. Additionally, luminaires that weigh over 50 pounds are required to be supported completely independently of the outlet box, unless, again, this is an exception, unless the box itself is listed and marked for the weight of the luminaire. Outlet boxes used for sole support for a ceiling paddle fan must be listed for the use, including the weight, and this is obvious. Continuing with luminaire support, in situations where we have pole-supported luminaires, that would include high mast lighting, exterior luminaires that are mounted actually on poles, require a handhold, which is a minimum dimension of 2 inch by 4 inch, and include wet location cover. It also is required to have an equipment grounding conductor termination within the handhold. And the reason for that is this connection is so critical to the safe operation and the bonding of the typically metal pole that the luminaire is hooked to make sure that it never becomes energized, or if it does become energized, that the current is going to be sent directly to the ground and cause a fault situation which would trip the breaker. This information is also covered in more detail in Article 410.30b. Luminaires are also required to be securely fastened to framing members of suspended ceiling systems by a mechanical means, which would include bolts, screws, and rivets, or also listed clips. This is detailed in Article 410.36b. This image is a typical detail, a light standard detail that is extracted from a set of DSA approved plans. And obviously, we're going to reiterate that you should read and review every word and every symbol on every plan and specification sheet for every project every time. Now, specifically with respect to safety, obviously structurally there's a lot of information on this detail that shows the footing for the light standard and some structural requirements for reinforcement and concrete. It also shows the conduits coming up from wherever they're being fed from and looping to. And one of the very important safety features to look at here is in the upper left-hand corner, as you can see. Let me show you here with the laser pointer. This area right here says number 4 bare copper ground wire bond to pole base. And they have an arrow here that's basically showing that you've got some sort of connection from the actual light standard base to the rebar cage encased in concrete. And this handhold, as we just said or noticed in one of the previous slides, is going to be removable and is going to provide access to view the connection, okay? Any connection that is underneath here, wiring connections. Now, since this particular design shows this decorative base cover, this cover can also be removed to view the actual connection to this bond connection from the light pole base to the rebar. So that's one of the most important things to look at electrically with respect to poles that are used to support luminaires. This slide shows a photograph of a typical luminaire installation in a suspended ceiling system. As you can probably see, there are support wires that are connected to each of the corners of the luminaire. And what you probably can't see is that this particular luminaire is also screwed directly to the ceiling grid. Now, as most of you are fully aware, DSA has an IR. It's number 25-2, and it's called Metal Suspension Systems for Lay-In Panel Ceilings. And this particular publication includes a tremendous amount of information specific to suspended ceiling systems. It also includes a variety of mounting requirements for luminaires within suspended ceiling systems that is dependent on the weight of the luminaire. So I would encourage all of you in situations where you have suspended ceiling systems to review IR 25.2 and also understand that this particular IR is for informational purposes and that no project inspector should use this particular IR as the basis for their determining what is appropriate with respect to suspended ceiling construction. And what I mean to say is the design professional is required to make sure that the construction processes are clearly defined on their approved plans. They cannot refer to IR 25.2 for installation requirements. They can use this document as the basis for their design, but they cannot use this document as the design, if that makes sense. So be sure that you've got IR 25.2 to refer to as a reference, but do not inspect installation practices based on this document. If you have any concerns about the appropriateness or the correctness of a constructed installation relating to luminaires and their fastening to suspended ceiling systems, be sure and discuss that with your district structural engineer. Let's talk now specifically about some requirements for the wiring of luminaires. First of all, conductor insulation has got to be protected from abrasion wherever it passes through metal. This requirement is found in Article 410.56b. Pendant luminaires have additional seismic considerations, and I would encourage everyone to also refer to DSA IR 16-9, which is titled Pendant Mounted Light Fixtures. Some of the details worth reiterating are these. The pendant luminaire must be permitted to swing 45 degrees from vertical in any direction without contacting anything. Safety cables are required from the fixture to the support structure. Where pendants penetrate suspended ceilings, they must comply, again, with IR 25-2, titled Metal Suspension Systems for Lay-in Panel Ceilings, Section 3.1. So be sure and review that particular section anytime you have a pendant luminaire that penetrates a suspended ceiling system. Continuing with the requirements for wiring of luminaires, cord-connected electric discharge and LED luminaires are identified and detailed in Article 410.62c. Some of those requirements include the following. The luminaire is located directly below the outlet box. The cord is required to be visible for its entire length, and the cord is equipped with an attached plug and energized from a grounded receptacle. Now it's important to note here that there are numerous listed assemblies where the cord is not visible for its entire length. And due to the cord, this is primarily due to the cord being cleanly encased in the hanging conduit and exiting at the top before the ceiling mounted box. These listed assemblies are acceptable for installation. So you could see this as somewhat of a conflict with what we just previously noted in one of these bullets, where it requires that the cord is visible for the entire length. However, these listed assemblies are acceptable and are used. This photograph on the right-hand side shows a cord-connected metal halide pendant luminaire that does not comply with the requirements. Additionally, it does not include a listed assembly for a pendant fixture. As you can see by looking at this, that the cord is not equipped with a grounding type plug and is not energized from a receptacle outlet. The actual cord is hardwired into that J box that you see mounted on the ceiling. So this is certainly not an acceptable method, and the assembly is not a listed or accepted assembly. Let's talk now about flush and recessed luminaires. Non-type IC luminaires, IC standing for insulation contact, must be located 1/2 inch minimum from combustible material and 3 inches minimum from thermal insulation. This requirement is found in Article 410.116A1. These types must not contact combustible materials or insulation, again, because they are not rated for insulation contact. So be sure and look for this designation on luminaires where they are not permitted to come in contact with either combustible materials or thermal insulation. Tap conductors may supply a luminaire where the flex, either type AC, which is armored cable, or MC, which is metal clad cable, whip, is between 18 inches and 6 feet in length, and the outlet is at least 1 foot from the luminaire. This requirement is covered in Article 410.117C. In the 2016 version of the California Electrical Code, a new requirement came up which had to do with ballast supplied fluorescent luminaires, specifically the requirement for a disconnecting means inside of a ballast supplied fluorescent luminaire with double-ended lamps. And this is specific to indoor locations and commercial and industrial installations. The information is detailed in Article 410.130G. Some of the pertinent requirements are this. The disconnect must be located within sight of or attached to the luminaire, and typically these are located within the luminaire, and we have a picture depicting that on the following slide. These disconnects may be mounted on the exterior of or the interior of the luminaire. These disconnects require disconnection of all ballast conductors, including the neutral, and for cord and plug connected applications, an accessible separable connector or acceptable plug and receptacle is permitted as the disconnecting means. So these would be situations where the actual ballast supplied fluorescent luminaire is not hardwired. It's actually connected by a cord plug and a receptacle. Continuing with our discussion regarding disconnecting means for luminaires, there are exceptions. Obviously, this is the California Electrical Code. Disconnecting means for luminaires are not required for number 1, hazardous locations, number 2, obviously emergency illumination, number 3, cord and plug connected luminaires, and we briefly mentioned that on a previous slide, and number 4, every luminaire in locations where supplied by other than a multi-wire branch circuit and illuminated space cannot be left in total darkness. This is going to be determined by the design team, and the plans will reflect this exception. For existing installed luminaires without a disconnecting means, the disconnect must be installed at the time of ballast replacement. And again, this refers to fluorescent ballast luminaires that have double-ended lamps installed in them. These two photographs show on the left a fluorescent ballast fed luminaire with the disconnect installed, and you can see it's just a very small little component that quickly connects and disconnects. And on the right hand side you can see a similar fluorescent luminaire without the disconnect. Additionally, the image on the right shows an access hole which appears too small. Remember that the requirement is that you can see all of the connectors without having to take anything apart or to take any wiring apart, and that's not the case with the junction box behind that luminaire housing. Additionally, the conductors that are coming out of that knockout hole in the fluorescent luminaire housing are not protected, and they're required to be protected from any chafing of the exposed metal. Here we go again. Read and review every word and every symbol on every plan and specification sheet for every project every time, right? Remember that. This should be a trigger for you. Again, there is lots of important information provided on this particular sheet, and we're going to go over a few of them right now, just very quickly. Generally, you have the room name and ID number indicated for all of these areas where these luminaires are shown to be installed. You have very important notes that are associated with some of these symbols and words. There are details, and there are also additional views that are associated with this particular portion of a drawing. With respect to lighting system components, this drawing shows important information for conductors. Information such as the quantity of conductors, the types, the sizes, and the generalized routing for the conductors themselves. It also shows very important information relating to conduit and raceways, which includes the size, the locations, whether there are home runs or other circuit loops, and also generalized routing for conduit and raceways. This image also shows the locations for junction boxes and switches, and also the types of junction boxes and switches. It obviously shows information specific to the luminaires, such as the types related, and these types are related and identified and detailed in the light fixture schedules, the location of the luminaires, and also the circuit landings where the conductors actually land within the panel boards. It also shows locations for panels, including panel names and ID numbers, and also their generalized locations in certain areas. This slide is basically just a summary of everything that we just discussed, looking at the previous excerpt from a plan view. But again, it's very important to understand that every symbol and every word on every page of the plans and the specifications is extremely important and must be reviewed prior to inspection. Here we go again. Read and review every word and every symbol on every plan and specification sheet for every project every time. Now this is an image taken from a plan set that shows a typical light fixture schedule. And as you can see, there's a lot of information on this particular sheet as well. Now again, remembering the sequence of events that happens with respect to plan review, or plan generation, plan review and approval, and also submittal review and approval by the design team and the contractor. Something to remember is that even though this is a light fixture schedule, it is on the first level of design proposals by the design team. As we know, specifications will also provide additional information for each of these luminaires. And the specifications typically will also provide some verbiage which allows the design professionals to identify an equal. So if they decide they don't want to use a certain brand, there are allowances to use other brands as long as the parameters that are established for the luminaire are consistent. These changes by the design team from, say, these light fixture schedules will be reviewed and approved by the design team and the contractor in the form of submittals. So generally speaking, the submittals will be the final approved document verifying exactly which light fixtures will be installed. So I encourage all project inspectors to review the information on the approved submittals, and when I say approved, I mean approved by the design team and or the contractor, to verify that the delivered fixtures comply with the approved submittals. Remember that equals provide the option for the design team, the owner, and the contractor to utilize components that are maybe different from the light fixture schedule, but certainly compliant with the intent of the design of the project itself. Another element for common construction projects, especially in this day and age, is to identify and verify Title 24 energy lighting requirements are complied with. Many designers now are ensuring that the electrical efficiency of lighting systems within projects are more stringent and more carbon friendly than ever before. Some of these requirements include information and details and designs relating to luminaire types, which includes ballasts and lamps, dual level switching, occupancy sensors, daylight control, required override switching, and approved lighting controllers. It's also important to verify always, as has always been the case, that switch locations are accessible per the plans and also the California Building Code Chapter 11B requirements. Let's continue now discussing some recent changes or some continued changes with respect to energy management systems as they relate to receptacles and power usage. Controlled receptacles are required to be marked in a certain way. There has been a change in the 2019 California Electrical Code relating to this topic that we'll address here. All 125 volt, 15 and 20 amp receptacles that are controlled by an automatic control device and or are part of an energy management system must be marked with a revised symbol, which is shown in Chapter 4, Figure 406.3E, and also is shown in the figure on the right-hand side. You can see that the receptacle on the right has got a figure which we've blown up in this particular slide here, that has a figure that looks like it's a switch or that it has some type of control, but it's now also required to have the word controlled printed underneath the symbol or somewhere on the receptacle in conjunction with the symbol in situations where the receptacle is actually part of an energy management system. So the changes to the code are, number one, it must be marked on the receptacle face, and it must include the word controlled in addition to the symbol. And that's what we've depicted here for your education. We're now going to talk about some requirements relating to ground fault circuit interrupter locations. The replacement of ground fault circuit interrupters and arc fault circuit interrupter receptacles must be installed in a readily accessible location. Now this hasn't changed, but this is important to understand and is detailed and discussed further in Article 406.4D. It provides clarification providing or provided prohibited receptacles installed in the face-up position or on countertop surfaces unless they're listed for countertop applications or part of a listed assembly. So you would generally not expect to see any receptacles, GFIs included, installed in the face-up position or on countertop surfaces unless they're part of a listed assembly. This is detailed in Article 406.5E through G. The installation of required circuit controls for 120 volt receptacles and controlled receptacles is detailed in Article 130.5. Some of the project inspector duties relating to GFCI locations is number one, to confirm that the GFCI installation is installed in an accessible location, and also to remember that GFCIs are always required in bathrooms, kitchens, rooftops, outdoors, sinks when they're within 6 feet of the outside edge of the sink, indoor wet locations, locker rooms when associated with shower facilities, garages, which includes service bays and similar areas, and swimming pools, per Article 680. These requirements are reiterated in Article 210.8b. And again, these will be identified on the plans, and your inspection will be based on the plans. But it's good information to understand if you see where the contractor has installed a non-GFCI receptacle in a wet location, that you would have a discussion with the contractor and the design team relating to the requirements that CEC has for that installation. To reiterate, the project inspectors must verify that the receptacle locations are accessible per the plans and the California Building Code Chapter 11B requirements. This is similar to what we just discussed relating to switches. Project inspectors must also verify that heating, ventilation, and air conditioning 125 volt service/maintenance receptacle is installed within 25 feet of HVAC equipment and located on the same level on the line side of the disconnecting means. This is based on information that's included in Article 210.63, and this reiterates some information that we clarified looking at one of the previous slides, which showed rooftop mounted air handling units and exhaust fans. In Articles 406.9A and B, we have a couple of new items relating to receptacles that are mounted in damp or wet locations. Specifically 15 and 20 amp 125 volt non-locking receptacles, which are installed in damp or wet locations, must be listed and also identified as a weather resistant type. The cover plate has also a requirement to be marked no equipment ground. Additionally, an in-use cover is required for receptacles located in wet locations, and this cover must be listed and also identified as extra duty. Continuing now with receptacle location requirements, a new amendment to the 2019 edition of the California Electrical Code is that tamper-resistant receptacles relates to tamper-resistant receptacles. All 15 and 20 amp, 125 and 250 volt non-locking type receptacles used at the following locations must be tamper-resistant. This information is found in Article 406.12. And those locations are child care facilities, which has existed for a few code cycles, but what's been added is the following: preschools and elementary education facilities, and also subsets of assembly occupancies listed in California Electrical Code Article 518.2, which includes gymnasiums, auditoriums, multi-purpose rooms, etc. So be very conscious of this, because this is a significant change, and you would expect to see tamper-resistant receptacles almost everywhere in preschools and elementary education facilities. Some additional new amendments to the 2019 edition of the California Electrical Code are as follows. For appliances, GFCI, or ground fault circuit interrupter protection, must be provided for personnel. Specifically, appliances listed below, rated 250 volts or less and 60 amps or less, single or three-phase, must be provided with GFCI protection. This is identified in Article 422.5a and includes, and again these are new, drinking water coolers and vending machines. Additionally, the GFCI must be listed, readily accessible, and is permitted to be located in a variety of locations, which we won't go into here. However, this information is provided in Article 422.5b.